approach a store. And while we're talking about all this, we really want to keep in mind making our buyers' lives easier, right? Anything we can do to lower that barrier to the sale, we're going to do it because they're busy ladies. We know that. So we want to make sure that we do that. So there's really going to be two scenarios where we're approaching stores with our lines. And so the materials that we need are going to vary slightly, but they all have their place. So that first scenario is pretty much exactly what we talked about with Kelly and Giselle, where you are submitting to them. In the case of both of them, they want you to submit through a very specific process on their websites. And so this is a case where the buyer isn't interacting with your product. You're really doing it all online. So that's one scenario where we're going to need a certain set of materials. And then the other one is, of course, when we're doing a trade show and we're meeting with buyers face-to-face and we're going to the show and we're going to have a set of materials there. So we'll talk about kind of all the things that we're going to need, and then we're going to break down when we need them and in what formats, because that's all going to change. So at its basic, we're going to need a handful of things. First, we need a sample set. And a sample set is literally going to be your product line. Now, obviously, this becomes way less critical if you're just approaching stores outside of a trade show. Because as we know, we're not taking our bag of stuff into a store. We're not stopping by on that busy Saturday afternoon. That is a huge no-no. We are never rolling into that store with our product. So really where you're going to need this is when you're hitting a trade show. Now, that said, if you've never organized a sample set of your product, I'd really encourage you to do it because it actually goes back to some of the stuff we talked about in that very first segment about evaluating your line. So if you've just been selling on Etsy, what you're probably doing is you're making an item, right? You're making it, you're photographing it, you put it in the shop, you put it away. And so you're not taking the time to really look at your line together in that full perspective that happens when you put together that whole sample set. So putting together a sample set, looking at it, looking at the whole thing, even if you're not doing a trade show, can be absolutely useful. But certainly when we're doing a trade show, you need that sample set. And this is the beauty of doing trade shows and wholesale. It's just one of everything. When I'm going to a wholesale show, I'm not bringing 12 of this necklace, 6 of that, 4 of that. It's one of everything, and then I'm writing orders. So that's going to cut down a lot of time because I'm not asking you to make a lot. Now, clearly, if you have variations, you're going to want to show that. So Monica, you guys have, it's one product, but there's a lot of different fabrics that they can get it in, and you're starting to roll out that other product. So you're certainly not going to have a booth with one product. You would have all the different options that they can get in terms of materials for sure. But really, it's one of everything. So then we're going to need a line sheet or catalog, and we're going to go into super detail about the rest of these. So a line sheet or catalog, we're going to have our wholesale policies, and they're going to go in a couple different places. And then you're going to need an order form or a system for writing orders. And we're going to break this all down. And again, what we need depends on the situation. So what you'll see here is that there's a lot of fluidity. Sometimes I need an order form, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I need a printed line sheet, sometimes it's okay as a PDF. So we're going to get into all of that. So the first thing that I want to answer is that line sheet versus catalog question, right? You guys kind of wondered, like, what's the difference? What do I need? So typically, historically, why it was called a line sheet is very simple. It had line drawings of product. That was the original iteration of a line sheet, and that's why it's called that. This is the line sheet for a product that I don't make anymore called the Cozy Cuff. And so my entire line sheet was literally this one page with line drawings, and then a second page, which was just color and material options. So that's kind of the origin, and that's a very, very basic line sheet. The catalog or the lookbook is going to be something that is much more lifestyle. So this is my friend's company. It's Espacio, and they're based out of Texas, and she was really, really awesome in letting us pull a couple of images from this. So they did this fantastic catalog where they did this entire lifestyle shot with their product. And I'm just showing you a small sample. Then she mixed it, images with those lifestyle shots. So that is kind of the line sheet versus catalog difference. There is no reason to feel like you have to make a catalog. We're going to look at a lot of line sheet options, and I have found that that serves very well. Additionally, I think it's that it makes it so much easier for buyers. I think Giselle and Kelly mentioned that if you've got like a catalog, but then you've got a price list, Kelly was like, my monitor's small, I can't look at both. Typically in a line sheet, clear images, clear prices, it's all spelled out. So if you're looking at this thinking, I don't have like an army of Austin hipsters to do my catalog, right? Like I don't have that. So these are like all of their friends in the company, right? I don't have that army of Austin hipsters. So that's okay. You do not need to do this. You absolutely do not need this as you go into wholesale. It's something that you may think about in the future, but don't be intimidated because it is so not necessary. And as I mentioned, the importance of a line sheet really varies greatly where you're selling. If you're predominantly selling at a trade show, it becomes a little less critical. Now, I'll show you my first line sheet, so it shouldn't be this bad. But my first trade show, this is what I rolled up with. I honestly had no idea what I was supposed to have, so let's just be clear about that. I didn't know anything. So I just made a price list. I don't know what they were going to do with this information. Like, there's no pictures. There's nowhere where they could go and look. But because I was at a trade show, I could actually get away with this. I think I got away with it for 2 shows, actually, because people were coming. They were writing orders at the show. And I wasn't so concerned with the follow-up at that point. So don't do this, but know that I started from something way worse than anyone here is showing. All right, so what makes a good line sheet? First and foremost, and Kelly and Giselle both said this, super important, good images. Good images are so essential because if a buyer can't tell what it is, they're not going to buy it. Then we need clear information. Things like materials, sizing if that's not clear, options, so if it comes in different sizes or it comes in different materials, we really want to make sure that we are communicating all of that effectively. It should also have a strong visual brand and good design. It should be a reflection of your company. Your fonts, your colors, your logos, it should feel like an extension of your brand. And then it needs to be clearly organized. And what that organization looks like is going to be different depending on your product category. So, for instance, as a jeweler, and we're going to take a look at my line sheet, I don't always group everything. Like, not all the earrings sometimes end up together. Actually, all the earrings end up together. But not all the necklaces end up together because there's a couple different collections. So it should make sense to the buyer, but don't worry so much about, is everything perfect? We just want it to be really clearly organized. So we're going to take a look at my line sheet now because, one of the things about wholesale is these are super proprietary. People make them, it's your thing, you share it with your wholesalers. It's not something you're putting on the internet for everyone to see. So we're working off of my line sheet because, quite frankly, I can't show you lots of other people's line sheets. Even if I have access to them, it's not my information to share. So we're going to look at mine, and I really appreciate the couple other people that we'll take a look at who did let me do that. But so I just want to be clear, this is not the only aesthetic for a line sheet, but we're looking at mine because I'm here. And I said we can look at it. So one of the things that I do with my line sheet, and just to let you guys kind of see this, I did bring physical copies too. So we'll take a look at some of these throughout. So you can see this is kind of how a PDF translates into physical. So one of the first things that you'll see is that there's different cover images, but it's pretty much the same cover layout. So one of my strategies is I do put out a new line sheet typically twice a year, once for each trade show season, but I'm not reinventing the wheel. I'm pretty much using the same format. I swap my cover image out so that I know really quickly and buyers know really quickly that it's a new line sheet, but I'm not trying to do anything crazy. So now we go into product pages. And here's where we want to make sure that we've got the really clear information. So here I've got a little bit of a description about the collection, and that tells us a little bit about the materials and the material options. So I've got 2 different codes here. Then I've got my item numbers. So this is what we would call our SKU, right, or our stock keeping unit. I don't use anything that auto-generates this for me. I make them up myself, and I make them up in a way that I remember. So I actually have a system that makes sense to no one but me and maybe my assistant, but it means a lot to us. So I'll actually explain it to you. So we look at something that says BLN318. It's this necklace right down here. So I actually use my first set of letters to tell me kind of material and major collection. So for me, BL stands for bronze leaf. If you see SL, that's steel leaf or silver leaf. If you see SHL, that's the silver and steel shift collection. So I use that first part to tell me what material I'm looking at. Then the second category for me, that N3, that tells me it's a necklace. So there's always my product type. You guys don't have to do it this way, but I want to give you a really clear example of how I do it so that you can figure out what that logical system looks like for you. So I'll use N, so DE is drop earring, so it's always going to have the N, the E, B for bracelet, R for ring. And then there might be other things in there that indicate a style number. So N3 is just a type of necklace. And then if I need the last set of numbers, this is N318, that usually tells me, how long something is. For the most part, it's how long. So that's an 18-inch chain. Super easy. 36-inch chain. There's a 52-inch version too. So I just tack those numbers on at the end. So it's a system that when I'm trying to write an order at a trade show, there's some logic to this. I'm not trying to remember that necklace 27 or necklace 64 or 00125. I'm like, it's the 18-inch bronze chain. I know exactly what that should say. So, and this makes a big difference when you're trying to write an order quickly because, as we talked about with Giselle, trade shows are super overwhelming for buyers, right? They have got a lot going on. So they can get in and out and get that order written quickly. That really helps them. So using a system that you can remember doesn't have to make sense to anyone else in the world, but it should make sense to you. So I've got my item numbers on there, and then I've got my prices. And you can see here, I always label the bottom, all prices listed are wholesale. I don't want there to be any confusion. Now, one change that I am going to make in future line sheets is adding that MSRP. It's not something I've done in the past, but I mentioned before that with more stores selling online, I want to start to get that consistency. And we heard that reiterated with Kelly and Giselle. They like seeing that MSRP. They like knowing where they should be. So that's the one change I'll make is I'll add that just below each piece. Now, for something like the necklaces, I don't do a ton to communicate size other than giving you the length. And you can see I just continue on, a little bit more of the same. And I tend to break things up sort of loosely by collection and then item. So that kind of bronze and steel collection, then I get into my steel and silver collection. But we're dealing with all the necklaces. Man, I really showed you guys all the pages, huh? This is the whole thing. Then I break into other categories, so bracelets. And I do have some style options, so silver and then gold filled or bronze and then steel and silver. And I'll indicate those on the line sheet as well. So you do want to think about where there's typical confusion with your buyer. So for me, one of my confusion areas comes in terms of the size of earrings. So if you need to indicate size, that's something that you do want to think about on a line sheet. And for me, what I realized was easier than trying to give inches because let's face it, this is really thinking about that and translating it. I like to do a few things that are actual size. So, I can't put everything actual size on this page, but this here, show an actual size. And then these little guys show an actual size. Obviously, they're not as big as they look on the screen. But if we're looking at the printed copy, that's how big they are in real life. So when we look at that page, there is no question about how big those earrings are. I measure. It's like I measure and then I measure again in Photoshop. Okay. There's no magic to that. And then I print it out and I hold up the earring and I make sure that it's right. Yeah, totally no magic. But yeah, so then I do it this is an earring style where it's basically the same earring in 4 different sizes. And I noticed I was getting a lot of confusion. So I just went ahead, here it is. My stores can actually keep this on hand. So when they go to order and they're like, I don't remember, they can lay their earring on there and match it up perfectly. So you want to think about how you can clearly communicate information, especially when there's confusion. And that's a great opportunity when you start getting stores. You can talk to them and ask them, or you just notice where they're getting confused. You send them earrings and they say, but I wanted the other size, but you ordered this size. So trying to really minimize that will make it so much easier on them. And then the last page of my line sheet is going to be a little bit of biographic information about me, and then my wholesale terms. And these are actually not my most current wholesale terms. We'll look at those a little bit later. You're also going to want all of your contact information. I just redacted it from all of the line sheets for obvious reasons. So anytime you see a gray box, assume that there's some critical contact information that a store is going to want. So you can see how I also carry this same thing through to the textiles line sheet. Now, I do split these up into 2 separate line sheets. So I use this one and I use the textiles. Only because when I'm dealing with shows, this guy's pretty thick to begin with. And I don't want to make buyers who are just interested in the textiles have to carry around a big thick chunk of jewelry if they don't want it. If they want both, I'll give them both. But if not, I let them split that up. But I would never split like my jewelry line into 2 catalogs. So you can see I am really all about not reinventing the wheel. So this looks exactly like my jewelry line sheet, but I stuck scarves in there. And then I stuck some pillows in there. Now, one of the things that I did do for this line sheet that I haven't yet done for the jewelry line, and I think that it's really great as far as communicating that story to the buyer, is I added this little process and about page with some great graphics. So with my textiles, everything starts as an original painting, and then it gets digitally printed on the fabric. That's a process that I knew needed a little explanation to my buyer, and I knew they were going to want to tell it to their customer. So right in that line sheet now I have not just this, but I've given them some images because as we talked about before, people don't always read. So this gives them this really great graphic representation of the process, and then they can turn around and talk about it with their customer. So this is something that for my next iteration of the jewelry line sheet, I'll be doing this for the jewelry as well because I think it tells a really great story that buyers can then communicate. And then the same thing, terms, conditions. These are my newer terms and conditions. So, and you can see in this case, I took out the bio part about me in terms of conditions because I'm covering that story here in a much more interesting way. So obviously with all of my line sheets, I'm using images on white background. I do my own photography. It's not because you have to. If you're not good at photography, hire someone. It's okay, just hire someone. I happen to really like product photography. I kind of geek out about it a little bit, so I do all of my own. So you notice that all of mine are on white background, but you wouldn't have to do that for your line sheet. So this is Megan Ekman from Studio Me. Some of you know Megan. I know. Hi, Megan, if you're watching. Megan is also hanging out in our private Facebook group that you guys can join when you purchase the class. So you'll see her in there as well, and she is awesome. So Megan does not use a white background, but she does this so well in her line sheet is you still feel like it's cohesive, there's a brand, and so she's still making that work. And then she does that with these too. So, she wanted to give her products a little bit of context. She wanted them to feel like, okay, here it is, I see it, I understand it. So don't feel like you have to cut to that white background in your line sheets if it does not work for your photography, because clearly this works really well. Now, I will say, though, that one of the smart things that Megan did is that even though, her images might have the dark background, the rest of her line sheet is still white. Because if you're going to email this as a PDF to a store and they want to print it, let's not suck up all their ink. Let's not kill their printer. So just because your product images have dark backgrounds doesn't necessarily mean that your whole line sheet should. In fact, it should not. All right, so let's talk about some options for designing a line sheet. How do you make this? So I use some funky combination of Photoshop and Illustrator. I really can't tell you exactly. Some things are there, some things are there. But ultimately, what I'm doing is I'm pulling it all together using Adobe. So if that's something that's in your skill set, totally use it. There's no magic formula. I am not a huge fan of something that's going to force me into a grid because what I don't like is taking products that are this big and compressing them all to the same image size because you lose that scale. So when you look back at my necklace pages, even though the necklaces aren't to scale, they're roughly in scale in relationship to each other. And if I was doing something that forced me into a grid, I wouldn't have this here. You wouldn't see that this one is longer. So this is why I like working on basically the blank slate of something like Photoshop or Illustrator. If those programs are a little bit scary to you, actually one sheet that I really like is you can use Keynote, which is Apple's version of PowerPoint. So it gives you a horizontal format, and I actually love the horizontal format because it's screen friendly. So printing wise, it doesn't matter, right, if it's horizontal or vertical. But if I'm a buyer and I'm going to open this up on my computer screen and it's this way, I'm not seeing the whole thing. I'm not taking advantage of the screen. Horizontal takes advantage of the screen, which I think is really good for a buyer because, Kelly mentioned she's got a small screen, so let's fill it and give her all that information. So Keynote, you can sit there just like you'd be designing a PowerPoint, but you can drop your images in, you can add text, super easy to deal with, and then you can export it as a PDF. So for those of you who are like, I don't know, Photoshop, Illustrator, I don't know, that's a really great place to start. If this is super scary to you, hire a graphic designer. If you're really focused on your brand, or, Shayla's already working with a great graphic designer, so absolutely have them work on your line sheet. Have them work on those materials. That's what they're there for. It keeps your branding consistent. So that's something really great to do. The other thing that you can do is you can use an online platform that auto-generates. This is not my favorite method, but again, if you are totally design challenged, if graphic design is not in your wheelhouse or you're not married to a graphic designer, not all of us are, then an online platform that auto-generates might be really fantastic. This is one that I have heard great recommendations on. I haven't used it yet. It's called BrandBoom. So BrandBoom. I believe it's just brandboom.com. So it is both an online platform. You can go in, you can create your online platforms. People can order from there. But then you can also auto-generate a line sheet that prints a PDF. The reason that I don't love these is because it, again, uses that system where then all your images become the same size. And so you lose that sense of scale in your products. But using this and having a clean, organized, easy to read line sheet is better than having a hot mess because you're not a graphic designer, or spending 50 hours fighting with something because it's not in your wheelhouse. So clean, organized line sheet, way better than if you can't. The other cool thing that BrandBoom does, I have not utilized this yet, but I just noticed they have this service, is they do product photography for, I think, pretty reasonable rates. So you send them your product, they shoot it on a white background, they send it back to you. So if product photography is not in your wheelhouse, this could be a really great option for you. And I believe it's like you set up the account for free and then you send in the products and they charge you per piece. So definitely something to consider. So while we're talking about BrandBoom and other places, let's answer that. Should I use an online wholesale platform? And do I need an online wholesale ordering system? Because I think most of you are asking this because I know it came up as a question with Giselle and Kelly. So this is one of those cases where first and foremost, think about your customer and the type of store they're shopping at and the type of buyer that you're encountering. So thus far in my business, I actually do not have an online system set up because my buyers in my stores tend to skew a little older. Sometimes I write orders at a trade show and then they give me their business card. I look at it later. There's not even an email address on it. So if my buyers aren't using email, they're probably not going to order online. But if your buyers are younger, if your buyers are Kelly or Giselle and they can go online and jump on, absolutely. You certainly want some kind of online platform, something that's going to make it easier. Now, they talked about Etsy Wholesale. And Etsy Wholesale is definitely a platform that can work for you. So it's the same thing. It's an online, password-protected online ordering system. You put your products up. With Etsy Wholesale, you can also auto-generate to help get that line sheet so you don't have to think about it. This is a case where, again, you really want to think about who your buyer is and is this going to work for them. My buyer, quite frankly, is not going to go on here. To them, Etsy is not a brand that they want to affiliate with. they might go to a place like Brand Boom because at the end it's kind of branded in your own space. They might, the other thing that you can do is, depending on your online shopping cart, you can actually turn that into your own wholesale shopping cart. So I use Shopify for my online retail shopping cart. But Shopify has a couple of plugins that you can use where you can actually set it up to let you also have wholesale pricing and wholesale ordering with a specific platform. So if you're already using something like Shopify, I haven't done it yet, but it's truthfully on my very soon to-do list. Just turn that function on and then problem solved. No reason to kind of fight with two different systems. At the very least, give people a way to get more information on your website. So if you go to the meganallman.com/wholesale on my website, you'll see this. So what I do is list my upcoming trade shows, and then I have a form that buyers fill out. And what this is going to do is let them give me very specific information and request my wholesale materials. So I ask them their business name, their contact name, their email, phone number, the type of store. So type of store, I ask them, are they brick and mortar? Are they online only? Or do they have both? I ask for their store website. I leave that one not required because, again, some of my stores don't have email. So some of them may or may not have websites. Then I ask them for a few other details about their store, how they heard about me. I do have a how did you hear about me button or field on there because I'd like to know how they found me. And then the last one is actually an option. Do they want to opt into my wholesale email list? Because, I'd like to know if I can go back in and hit them up later. So this is at the very least something you can do. All right, so before we talk about you've designed your line sheet, I want to go back and see, do we have any line sheet questions? Everyone's good on line sheets? We're going to get to critiques. So
mine's a mess.
So yeah, we're gonna come back to that.
That's all I can.
All right, we are certainly not done with line sheets. We're going to come back and we are actually going to look at, we have got a number of line sheets from our studio audience and from our online audience. So we're going to look at those shortly. Go ahead, Lauren.
So with our packaging, we put our product in a box. Would they want to see every side of that box?
I don't think so.
Okay.
So what I would do in that case is the example I showed you of Megan Ekman's is a really good one. One image shows you how it's packaged, and then the rest just show you the product. So they don't need to see every side. Now, if you give them very different information on, say, like the front and back, then I would maybe show both. Shayla, with yours, you've got information on the front and a story on the back. Show both sides of that packaging so they know completely what they're getting. Okay.
And then what about samples for something it seems like something that they would want to be able to touch and smell and try or whatever?
So, again, I think to kind of go back to what we talked about with Kelly and Giselle, you would never just send a sample.
Right.
But in your case, because your product is less expensive and because it has that kind of smell thing, I would put a caveat in your line sheet that says, like, samples are available upon request. I put some kind of system in place, like we will send no more than 2 or 3 or something, because you don't want them to ask for samples that end up amounting to an entire wholesale order, right? That's totally not good. So you can put that in there and then say, something like, if you choose to order, we'll include the cost of the samples in your order. If not, here's the return postage.
Okay, perfect.
Do we have any questions from our online audience?
We've got some very basic ones. So they recognize that you, they were asking, why do you ask stores for EIN? Is it to verify it's a store, or do you do it for some other reason? And do you require resale numbers from buyers?
Yeah, so I actually do ask in that form for a resale number. And then typically asking for the EIN is just asking because if you have someone giving you money, then you have to issue tax forms. These are things that I would have you clarify with your accountant. So I'm just going to put that out there. I am not an accountant. And so you want to check with your accountant or your bookkeeper to make sure that you are getting the right information for your country, your local area, and that you're getting the right stuff from stores. But typically you do ask for a resale number just to make sure that they have it and that they're operating as a real store. But honestly, if if they have a functioning website where you can see images of their location, now we have fantastic things like Yelp. So you can find out, are they a good store? First of all, are they still open? Second of all, are they really saying what they're saying there are? Yelp is going to tell you that. So there's a lot of stuff we can do now on the internet to check up on stores to make sure they're legit.
Great. I should have said those questions came from TH and G Muffins, so thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. All right. So we're going to go back in and look at all some good line sheets in a minute. But let's talk about, we've designed it, right? So now what are you going to do with it? So if you're doing an actual physical line sheet that you've designed, you're going to create a PDF and host it online somewhere. This, as a file, is giant. I don't know how many megabytes it is, but it's huge. I am not sending this as an email attachment. So this is a case where we're going to put this on Dropbox. I use Amazon S3, some kind of file sharing system so that you can send out a link. Here's the link to download my line sheet as a PDF. So that's one thing that you're going to do. If you're going to a trade show, or if we want to do a mailing where we're actually sending stores line sheets, probably not all 500 on our list, but maybe we're doing a targeted 10, 20, 50 even, particularly if you're not doing a trade show, then you're going to want to get it printed. I also think it's nice if you can send stores something printed because then they're not having to print it on their dollar. But again, you want to save this for your really strong prospects. Don't send out 500 line sheets. That's not good for trees. So be nice to the trees. Send it just to the really clear ones. So you have a couple options. I actually print these myself on my home printer. I run them off. Now, I'm pretty smart about it. Clearly, there's not a lot of ink usage. Works well for my product. I have a pretty decent quality printer. And that's worked pretty well for me. But you can certainly use a lot of other online places. A couple that do like catalog, brochure type printing. psprint.com, jakprints, jakprints.com. And if you want to really reduce the number of trees, greenerprinter.com uses a lot of recycled paper, better inks, that kind of thing. So you can certainly get them printed as well. You're really only printing these if you're going to a trade show or you want to do a mailing to a store. Now, I know one of the questions that's going to come up, and we can talk about it more when we talk about trade shows, is how many do I bring to a trade show? I do not go crazy anymore. I think I used to run off like 100 or so, and I realized that was super insane. Now I typically run, I would say, anywhere between 25 to 50, figuring worst case scenario, if I run out, I'll take their card, I'll send it to them later.